Back to another lecture of Dental Pathshala, where we help you understand and learn dentistry better and easy. And this is a continuation of the anatomy series. Today we'll be talking about the deep cervical fascia. What are the spaces which are involved in the deep cervical fascia, and what are the layers which are involved? Superficial, the most superficial is going to be our investing fascia. So it is going to be surrounding the sternocleidomastoid and the trapezius muscle. So it is the most superficial layer, the outermost layer. And once you remove the superficial layer, we are going to see the sternocleidomastoid and the trapezius muscle. Then we have the larynx and the trachea. And investing surrounding the larynx and the trachea, as well as the esophagus, we have the pretracheal fascia. So that means it is going to not only in the front but also behind the trachea. So that is going to be the pretracheal fascia, which is going to be surrounding the trachea. Then the third one we have is the prevertebral fascia, and as the name suggests, it is going to surround the vertebrae. So let's see in a three-dimensional, before seeing a three-dimensional structure, let's understand that. First of all, we have the investing layer, which is the superficial layer. Once you remove the investing layer, we are going to see the trapezius muscle and the sternocleidomastoid. So investing layer forms the floor of the posterior triangle of the neck. The roof. Basically, it forms the roof of the posterior triangle of the neck. So the investing layer forms the roof of the posterior triangle, while on the other hand, the floor of the posterior triangle is formed by the prevertebral fascia. So once you remove the investing fascia, we are going to see the sternocleidomastoid as well as trapezius, and along with that we are going to see the posterior triangle of the neck, which we have studied in the previous part. And once you remove all the muscles, then you are going to see the prevertebral fascia, which is present at the floor of the posterior triangle. And all these fascia contributes to the carotid sheath as well. So if we are looking at the carotid sheath, we have the internal carotid artery, which is a continuation of the external common carotid artery. So suppose we have this common carotid artery, which gives off the branches external carotid artery and the internal carotid artery, which continues. So this is a common carotid artery. Then we have the internal carotid artery here. So the internal carotid artery and the external carotid artery. Then we also have the internal jugular vein, which is distal to the internal carotid artery. So this is our internal jugular vein, internal carotid artery. And behind to this we have is the vagus nerve. So in between and behind to this we have is the vagus nerve, which is the 10th cranial nerve. Internal jugular vein. And all of these are embedded in the carotid sheath. So they are embedded in the carotid sheath. And anterior to the carotid sheath, we find the trachea. So we have pretracheal fascia. So we have pretracheal fascia, which is anterior to this carotid sheath. So this is our pretracheal fascia. Which is anterior to this carotid sheath. So this is our carotid sheath. And posterior to the carotid sheath, we can see the prevertebral fascia, which is surrounding the vertebrae. So this is our prevertebral fascia. So this is present anteriorly. The pretracheal fascia is present anterior to the carotid sheath, and the prevertebral fascia is present posterior to the carotid sheath. So if you see, we have the investing layer, which is the first layer. So we are going to have the investing layer of the deep cervical fascia, the superficial layer, and which forms the roof of the posterior triangle of the neck, which is bounded by the sternocleidomastoid and the trapezius muscle. Once you remove this investing layer, we are going to see the sternocleidomastoid muscle anteriorly, and posteriorly we can see the trapezius muscle. Along with that, we can see the posterior triangle of the neck. So it is going to split and enclose both of these muscles, the sternocleidomastoid and the trapezius muscle, and it goes all around the circumference of the neck. Next, we have the pretracheal fascia, which is going to go behind and front of the pharynx and the esophagus. So basically, circumferentially involving the pharynx and the esophagus. So we have the pretracheal fascia, which is going to surround the trachea. Along with that, it is going to surround the esophagus as well. That is why it is also known as the preesophageal fascia also. So pretracheal fascia, it is going to surround the pharynx and the esophagus, and the posterior part of this pretracheal fascia is known as the buccopharyngeal membrane. So the posterior part is known as this is the posterior part, guys, which is known as the buccopharyngeal fascia or the buccopharyngeal. So the posterior continuation part of the pretracheal fascia behind the pharynx and the esophagus is known as the buccopharyngeal fascia. So pretracheal fascia has got many layers. Anteriorly also, when it is surrounding the organs like thyroid gland, then it is known as the visceral pretracheal fascia. When it is surrounding the muscles, like here you can see it is surrounding the muscles, then we call it the muscular pretracheal fascia. So pretracheal fascia also we have various fascias, like we have the muscular fascia, we have the visceral fascia. So first layer is the superficial layer of the deep cervical fascia, which is known as the investing layer. Once we remove the investing layer, we can see the posterior triangle of the neck. Therefore, it forms the roof of the posterior triangle, and we can also see the sternocleidomastoid muscle and the trapezius muscle. Once we are going to remove all of these, we can see the pretracheal fascia. And then once we remove the pretracheal fascia, we can remove the trachea, we can see the esophagus, and behind the esophagus, we can see the buccopharyngeal fascia. Now we have the vertebrae. So these are the vertebrae, guys. Enclosing these vertebrae, we have is the prevertebral fascia. So this is going to be the prevertebral fascia, which is going to enclose the vertebrae, right? So this is our prevertebral fascia, which encloses the paravertebral muscles. Now what happens? This prevertebral fascia splits into two. So let's see it again. Say suppose this is our prevertebral fascia. Then what happens? It splits into two. The anterior part is known as the alar fascia. So this anterior part is going to be the alar fascia, while on the other hand, the posterior part, we call it the proper prevertebral fascia. So this is the proper prevertebral fascia. So we can say that prevertebral fascia is also divided into proper prevertebral fascia and the alar fascia. The alar fascia is the one which is going in front of the proper prevertebral fascia, and in between this space we call it the danger space, which is present between the proper prevertebral fascia, which is present posterior to the danger space, and anterior to the danger space we can see this alar fascia, which I have made in a red color. So you can see the alar fascia in the anterior, prevertebral fascia proper in the posterior, and in between this space, this potential space, this space is known as, so this space is known as the dangerous space. So what happens? Why it is known as the dangerous space? Because the infection can spread from here into the mediastinum. So this is the dangerous space. The space between the prevertebral fascia proper and anteriorly the alar fascia. Since the infection can go into the mediastinum, therefore it is known as the danger space. So this is the danger space. So this space is known as the danger space, which is present between the prevertebral fascia and the proper prevertebral fascia and the alar fascia. So let's see in another diagram over here. So we have this prevertebral fascia which is surrounding the sternocleidomastoid muscle. You can see anteriorly we have the sternocleidomastoid muscle. So this is the sternocleidomastoid. Posteriorly you can see the trapezius muscle. So the fascia which is enclosing the sternocleidomastoid and the trapezius muscle is our investing fascia, which is the superficial fascia, most superficial fascia. So guys, this is our investing fascia. Which also forms the roof of our posterior triangle. Then we have this trachea. So as you can see the trachea over here, we have the esophagus also. So this is our esophagus. Then we have the trachea, and surrounding this trachea and the esophagus we have the pretracheal fascia. So this is the pretracheal fascia. And pretracheal fascia has also got many components, like when it is surrounding the muscles, then you can see this is the muscular pretracheal fascia. So this is the muscular component of the pretracheal fascia. This is the visceral component. So this is our pretracheal fascia. Then you can see this vertebral column, and surrounding this vertebral column we have the prevertebral fascia. So guys, we have this prevertebral fascia. So as you can see, surrounding this we have the prevertebral fascia. So this is our prevertebral fascia. And also we know that the posterior part of the pretracheal fascia is known as the buccopharyngeal fascia. So guys, this posterior part is known as the buccopharyngeal fascia. So this is the buccopharyngeal fascia. And the space behind this buccopharyngeal fascia is known as the retropharyngeal space. So let's write it down. First of all, we have the investing layer, which is the superficial layer, which surrounds the trapezius muscle and the sternocleidomastoid muscle. So this is our investing layer or investing fascia. Then we have a fascia which is surrounding the larynx. So say suppose this is the lumen of the pharynx. Then we have the fascia which is surrounding the pharynx, larynx, esophagus. So that is going to be our pretracheal fascia. And the posterior part of this pretracheal fascia is known as the buccopharyngeal fascia, right? So here we have the pretracheal fascia. So let's say the lumen of the pharynx, and down we have the trachea also. And posterior to the posterior part of this pretracheal fascia is known as the buccopharyngeal fascia. Then we also know that we have vertebral column here. So let's draw the vertebral column here. Now, vertebra. Now we know that the prevertebral fascia is the fascia which surrounds the vertebrae. So we have this prevertebral fascia which splits into two. So this is the prevertebral fascia and it is going to split and form the alar fascia. So this is the prevertebral fascia proper. Prevertebral fascia proper. And we also have the alar fascia. And in between this space we call it the danger space. So anterior to the danger space we have the alar fascia, posterior to the danger space we have the prevertebral fascia. Now the space which is behind the buccopharyngeal fascia, basically it is a space which is behind the trachea or the pharynx or the esophagus. So we call it the retropharyngeal space. So this space is known as the retropharyngeal space. And the space in front of vertebrae is known as the prevertebral space. So we have this prevertebral space. So if you can see the sequence we have for spaces is, first we have anterior most is the retropharyngeal space which is behind the buccopharyngeal fascia. Then we have the danger space which is behind the alar fascia. Then we have the prevertebral space which is behind the or posterior to the prevertebral fascia proper. So likewise we also have the fascias. The first one we have is the investing fascia. Then we have the pretracheal fascia. So posterior part of this pretracheal fascia is known as the buccopharyngeal fascia. Then we have the alar fascia and the prevertebral fascia. So these are the fascias. Now see in the three-dimensional diagram. So as you can see up here, this is the investing fascia. We can say this that if we remove the investing fascia of the deep cervical fascia, then we can see the sternocleidomastoid and the trapezius muscle, and also we can see the posterior triangle of the neck. So you can see the sternocleidomastoid and the trapezius muscle. Along with that, you can see the posterior triangle of the neck. So the investing layer or the investing fascia forms the roof of the posterior triangle of the neck. What forms the floor of the posterior triangle of the neck? Yes, you are right. The prevertebral fascia forms the floor of the posterior triangle of the neck. Now that you can see the space, now we can see all the investing layers. We can draw it by ourselves. So we can see the vertebra, and up front we have the thyroid gland, trachea, thyroid cartilage. So let's draw all the fascias. So let's draw all the fascias up here. So guys, anterior to the vertebra we have the prevertebral fascia which splits into the alar fascia and the prevertebral fascia proper. So this is the prevertebral fascia proper which splits into the alar fascia also. So this red one is going to be our alar fascia. The one which is behind the alar fascia is our prevertebral fascia. and in between this space is known as the dangerous space. So this is going to be the danger space. Why it is known as the danger space? Because the infection from here can go into the mediastinum, into the chest cavity. And we also have a fascia which is surrounding the trachea. So this is going to be our pretracheal fascia. If it is surrounding the visceral organs, then that is a visceral. If it is surrounding the muscles, then it is muscular. So this is our pretracheal fascia. And the posterior part of this pretracheal fascia is known as the buccopharyngeal fascia. So this one is our buccopharyngeal fascia, which is the posterior part of this pretracheal fascia. Buccopharyngeal fascia. And the space which is present posterior to this buccopharyngeal fascia is known as the retropharyngeal space. So all of this space is going to be a retropharyngeal space. Retropharyngeal space. And guys, the superficial most fascia is our investing fascia. So here we are going to have the investing fascia. So that is all about the fascias. I hope that now you have understood the fascias well and you can memorize it, since as the name suggests that pretracheal is going to be in front of the trachea, prevertebral is going to be in front of the vertebra, but it is not only in the front, it is actually encircling or enclosing. So this is about the fascias. I hope that you have enjoyed this video. If you have enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up. Also comment in the comment section below, because this motivates me to put more videos for you guys and to make free notes which are available on the website. You can also check out the link provided in the description box below. So guys, check out our website www.xtooth.com for more interesting notes. Till then, keep reading, keep learning, stay motivated. I'll see you soon in the next lecture.